Now, earlier in the week, we heard from Stephen Ruxell from the Chamber of Commerce, who was having a discussion about GST, and he said this on air.
Let's have a big boy discussion about those as well, which I'm sure we will, but that's certainly what we would like to see.
And Vice President of the Policy and Resources Committee, Deputy Heidi Soulsby, was speaking in the States Chamber yesterday on GST when she said this.
So I ask those who believe we can have it always to put their big boy pants on and make some difficult grown-up decisions.
How would you feel hearing the phrase big boy pants in your work if you were a female or didn't identify as a man? Perhaps you work in a male-dominated industry and you already feel that your voice isn't heard. And how would you feel if there was terminology and language used in the workplace which didn't reflect the entire workforce? And does it exclude people from the place of work accidentally? We had Victoria Stamps, who's the new Deputy Seneschal of SARC on BBC Radio Guernsey a few weeks ago, and this is what she had to say about women in politics.
Take the plunge, get involved, because there are so many things that we can do, and I do realise that there can be something of a, let's call it an old boys club feel about what happens in other areas of public life, so particularly within politics. But that can only be addressed if more women are involved and are prepared to stand up and say, hello, I'm here and I'm not going to take any of your nonsense.
Gender language is a really interesting discussion point, and since looking into this, Stephen Ruxell, who was the first clip we heard there from the Chamber of Commerce, gave us a response saying, language is an ever-changing environment, and I do check my privilege at every opportunity. My vocabulary is something I want to change. I will try to adjust my phrase in the future. I will certainly take this as a learning opportunity. Using the phrase boy brings certain connotations. It reinforces the patriarchal privilege. Really interesting, because this kind of language is certainly something that some of us, or a lot of us, would use without thinking. So let's discuss this further. I'm joined by Zoe Liu as St Peter Port Designere, who's Treasurer for Women in Public Life Guernsey, and she's also been a Director of the Guernsey Football Association. She's on the line. Good morning, Zoe. How do you feel if you were part of a minority in a position and the language used didn't include you at all?
Good morning, and thank you for having me on. I would like to say I'm as guilty of saying I'm going to put my big girl pants on, because I'm talking about me in terms of referencing. So if you are talking about yourself and saying, I just need to put my big girl pants on and kind of own up to this, I think when you're putting it out there, I think that they're just slip of the tongue. I don't think either Heidi or the other gentleman meant to offend or isolate anybody. It was just a slip. I personally don't feel that I've ever been marginalised because of my gender. I'm in the positions I am in now. I have been in the positions I have been in because of my skills, not because of my gender, not because of tokenism or anything else. So I'm not easily offended, but I can see how some people might say, oh, that probably wasn't the right thing to say. And, you know, he's responded, and he knows he needs to evolve his language and his lexicon. And, you know, don't forget Heidi's there in the assembly in a male-dominated environment. So if she'd have said, let's put our big girl pants on, the men would have looked at each other and gone, what is she on about?
Yeah, it's really difficult because there's these common phrases we use where it does have a gender to it. Like you said, you're saying big boy pants is probably...
Or big girl pants,
or big girl pants is a phrase that we would use, but of course it only includes one gender. So should language and terminology reflect gender, or is there other ways around it?
It is a tricky one. I mean, where do you draw the line? Do we then say, oh, it's a bit of a bad situation, we all need to dig down deep and hard, and let's put on our gender-neutral pants? I mean, people will start looking at you weirdly and go, what are you talking about? So, yeah, I think perhaps there needs to be an awareness of vocabulary. Perhaps we need to be a bit more cautious in what we say, so we don't marginalise anybody. But like I say, you know, both when I was on the GFA board for 3 years, currently as a constable of the parish and a douzieniere, I don't feel in any way put upon on basis of gender at all.
Well, that's really good that you don't feel particularly affected by it. Let me bring in Dr. Jill Armstrong, who's a gender equality researcher, consulting academic, and author of The Accidental Sexist. Good morning, Dr. Armstrong. How important does language and terminology affect unconscious bias in your view?
Good morning. It's nice to be invited to talk about this. I think words like big boy pants, big girl pants can sound really trivial to people, but words are important and they have an important effect on how we're seen, how we're judged, and how we feel. And I think the most important thing to say here is that most of us believe that we treat other people on merit, but merit's a judgment, it isn't a fact. And I think most of us underestimate how accidental sexism, born of unconscious bias, which means deeply held views about the skills and weaknesses of each gender, people underestimate how unconscious bias kind of colours what we do and what we say. And it's really hard for us to see the many, many everyday things that happen over time that diminish women, especially women of colour, and mean that women get fewer opportunities to show their merit and potential, and also these words diminish you in a little way. It can make you feel less confident. And so actually the effect of that is people don't stand up to be elected as one of the people said they should, or women feel that they don't belong. And this isn't just true of women, it's true of many different groups. So I think the big thing here is we do underestimate the effect that these small things have. And research tells us actually that the effect on people's careers is as great as egregious things like sexual harassment. So I think we should take these things seriously.
No, of course. But I mean, at the same time, I'm sure you'll appreciate there'll be some people listening who will say, well, things have moved on so much in the last 50, 70 years. Society's changed dramatically in that time. There's still long ways to go, but we are on a much more even playing field when it comes to gender equality compared to, say, the 1950s. So, I mean, how far more do we actually need to go to be able to kind of make sure that there's a level playing field and that we're not pushing this unconscious bias on people?
I think it's great that so much has changed since the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, but there's still a way to go. And if we just look at the figures of how well women are represented in positions of seniority or in the States Assembly, for example, we know we haven't gone far enough. So I think that it's the responsibility of all of us, really, to better educate ourselves about these little things, which can be about women being talked over more or women being interrupted more so they don't get their point across, so they don't get credited, or women being asked to demonstrate their expertise more, women being critiqued more, women getting more abuse on social media. These are all little things, including the kind of language that you've talked about, the big boy and the big girl pants, that mean that actually there isn't a level playing field. So I think until we're more aware of the accidental things that we do, because it is an accident for most of us, and men do it and women do it, I think we need to be more aware, and I think we need to start picking ourselves up on it a little more, and also in a respectful way, picking up other people.
Yeah, let me just bring in Zoe for a last word here. Zoe, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, the way that we challenge and we can dictate the future and the pathway is by making women more aware, particularly, that these responsibilities, these posts, these jobs, these volunteering roles, elected roles are available. Previously, it's been very secretive and it's almost felt like it's, something people don't talk about. By encouraging more women to stand or put themselves forward for these positions, you then dilute that workforce, that pool of resource, and therefore we can have these conversations, and generally and naturally the culture will evolve. 20% of our constables of the parishes currently in Guernsey are women. We could do better. 30% of the douaniers on the island across 10 parishes are women. What we're trying to do, Women in Public Life are doing, is encouraging women to stand. We're not saying they're necessarily better for the job. We're saying these are the opportunities available, and that then allows the conversation, and then that then allows us to be heard in groups and in places where perhaps we weren't previously welcome or thought about.
Yeah. Well, look, Zoe, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's Zoe Liu, Speederport Dusneer and Treasurer for Women in Public Life Guernsey. And we also heard there Dr. Jill Armstrong, who's gender equality researcher, consulting academic and author of The Accidental Sexist. Really interesting. Be interesting to see, as Zoe was saying, how they're working towards getting more women in public life, as the group name suggests, and how that might change gender language in the future.